Welcome to the channel. You're with Reverend Dr. J.W. Morrison, Theologist. We're going to do a bit of Bible and some introspection. Sorry for the background noise. I am on the run. Matthew 7, verse 1. Do not judge, or you will be judged. Now, I don't use this scripture very lightly. What I've learned over the last 40 years or so, that the way you judge somebody else could possibly be the way you end up. That's why judging's dangerous. The way you judge somebody else could be the way you end up. That's why judging is so dangerous. Judging, in a way, is self-prophesying what you want to become. Now, if it's illegitimate, things do have to be judged, right? But they have to be judged for the right reasons, with the right intent, and for the right outcome, and that is to avoid evil. When we judge just for the sake of judging, illegitimate judging to get people in trouble for the wrong reasons, judging people for the sake of it, judging just because we've got a grudge or some grievance with somebody, or for the wrong reason, to bring judgment on somebody for the wrong reason, or some kind of influence against somebody, that sort of judgment is wrong. And that's when you start to self-prophesy and bring on yourself the spirit of what you're portraying somebody to be, which they are not. You can become what you judge. Now, is this something that to be alarmed about? I think it is, because as a young male, my father was a womanizer. He was a jockey and he was a womanizer. And we were taught to hate him by our mother. We were taught to hate him, despise him, and that he was an evil man. And he was. His actions depicted that. The way in which he was showed what he was. And as much as I determined not to be that way, there were parts and stages in my life where I was. I become what I judged. I become what I hated. Did I mean for that to happen? No, but it did. In some spiritual way, some consequential way, that's what I became. And when I come across the scriptures, when I become a Christian and read this passage, do not judge, or you will be judged. For the same judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the same measure you use, it will be measured to you. We self-prophesy. We bring spirits upon ourselves when we judge. It's a very dangerous way to look at things. When we illegitimately judge, that judgment, that wrong judgment, can come on upon ourselves. And it's a very stark warning, clear as crystal in the scriptures. Now, why am I laying this foundation? Because it's a spirit that drives a lot of people and wedges a lot of people in life. And what they don't want to become, they become. And they can't work out why. But I think it goes in line with the scripture that says bad company corrupts good character, but only if you let it. Okay, when you go out into the world and preach the gospel, you're going to get out with the other side of the street, as it were. Otherwise, if you judged all that, you wouldn't go out into it, would you? You'd just be devoid of anything that wasn't clean and clear as crystal. That's not how it works. So what happens when you judge? You begin to decompose. You begin to not renew. You begin to bring the things that you are judging illegitimately upon yourself. That's why judges are held at such high esteem. because they're putting themselves at risk, not just in the natural realm, but in the spiritual realm as well. If you judge unfairly or wrong or discriminately, that has an impact on your life, whether you see it or not, in the natural. So we have every right to have judgment, but it has to be legitimate judgment and for the right reasons. Sometimes we judge and it's really none of our business to do it. So then we're opening ourselves up again to the spiritual realm, and we don't even need to. That's why we ought to mind our own business more often than not. But some people just can't do that. They just don't know how to mind their own business, and they mentally decompose. It's not good for your mental health. Now, to some people, the thought of mentally decomposing really has no relevance. They have no fear of it. But they're doing it to themselves every day through attitude and through the thoughts in which they sow towards others and themselves. Mental and physical decomposure to some people doesn't mean anything. They don't have any fear of it. But they do it to themselves. And this brings us right down to our sinful nature, our fallen nature, which the Bible speaks about so often. Well, it's really the crux on how to escape evil, isn't it? Which is our sinful, evil nature. And guess what? The favourite thing is that our sinful nature loves to do. It loves to judge. And guess who else loves to judge? The father of lies, Satan himself, the accuser of the brethren he's called. So when you're in a situation where, people are illegitimately judging and you might be on the end of it, just walk away. Remove yourself. We live in a world where people will be by your side one minute and backbiting you the next. They'll be in bed with you one minute and pulling you down the next behind your back. We live in a world where the same people that are by your side are pulling you down behind your back and tearing you to pieces, and you won't know. But it's the same spirit. And what they're doing is they're mentally, spiritually decomposing. They're allowing the spirit realm and life and the universe and the powers of darkness to bring about they're decomposing themselves. They're allowing themselves to decompose. And decompose is like an orchestra that's tuning up. And the person knows how to tune the instrument, but it just won't tune. The human body can get to that point, and it can be a shock to the person who's abused it, mentally, physically, emotionally and spiritually. And a lot of people just think they're automatically right without personal introspection and the limits of their own personal judgment and looking in the mirror at ourselves is limited to the default understandings and permissions and omissions within the family, and that protects them from error, because families have a way of keeping each other in denial. They don't want to take accountability and responsibility for their own personal erroneous choices and harmful choices and attitudes and decisions. And what happens is they find themselves immature and infantile, not only damaging themselves but damaging people that come into their lives. And there's a way in which they do this. They chameleonize. There is no better expert in the game of camouflage and deception than the fallen human nature. And we all have it, and we'll all use it how we choose. The Bible goes on in verse 3, why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but fail to take notice of the beam in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, while there is still a beam in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the beam out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck out from your brother's eye. And this is where we all go wrong. We're all too quick to judge somebody else. We're all too quick to pull down somebody that don't suit us. And I've seen this time and time and time again. And I've been on the end of it time and time and time again. And it's very covert. 9 times out of 10, you won't even know that this person's got a problem with you. You won't even know that this person's judging you. But what they don't realize is they're spiritually, mentally and emotionally, physically decomposing. And you'll find these people know how to deceive. They know how to camouflage themselves. When they meet someone, they can hide it. They can hide their judgmentality, the bitterness and twistedness they have towards life. And they use the person or the person that they meet as a form of soothing. But that's all it is. It's a form of soothing for something much more sinister and far more superior and uglier than what we would describe to be as love. And what they're doing when they meet people is trying to take the plank out of their own eye, while they're picking the spicks and specks in everybody else's life. And the power that they're receiving from the people that they meet, the genuineness and the effort that the person's making to put into their life, ultimately is met with what's happening to them on the inside. And that's decomposure. The relationship starts with love bombing. You're the best thing I've ever met. I've never spoken to you or anybody else. I've never spoken to anybody else before the way I speak to you. I've never told these things to anybody else before, the things that I've told you. When I met you for the first time, at that moment, I knew you were the one. I want to have your babies. You're the only person that I've ever known to be like this, and I don't think I'll ever meet anybody else like this again. And it goes on and on and on. Now I can tell you, because I'm nearly 60 years old, and I've had over 45 years experience, or more than that, with partners and relationships, and I've seen and heard it all. Now, am I taking anything away from that? No, I think it's wonderful to hear those kind of things. But what do you do when the person starts to decompose in the relationship? When the love bombing stopped and you start to see things happening that just aren't representing what the relationship started as. You start to challenge things. You start to bring things straight up. I'm one to bring things straight up. I don't like to play the game of let's sweep that under the carpet. And what I've found is, and this is the strange part about it, if you start having to bring things up, 9 times out of 10 I've found that bringing things up just doesn't stop. It gets worse and worse and worse. And then you get to this part in verse 6. Do not give dogs what is holy. Do not throw your pearls before swine. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and then turn and tear you to pieces. And that's the whole point of not judging. Be more careful with your life. If somebody's taking you for granted, don't throw yourself to that person anymore. Don't give yourself to that person anymore. If you feel like your goodness is being trampled, don't give your goodness to that person anymore. If you feel like they're tearing your time and your person to pieces, that means they're mentally decomposing right in front of you. They're physically decomposing right in front of you. And a lot of these people are naive. They'll come across your path, the light's shining bright, everybody's getting along fine, and then all of a sudden they begin to decompose. And you pretend you're not seeing it, you pretend you're not sensing it, but you are, and it's real. And you try to weed the garden, and you try to mow the lawn of the relationship, and you water it, and it's here. Do not give dogs what is holy. You're trying to be holy. You're trying to play a proper role, but it's just not being reciprocated. Then the communication starts to slow down because you're trying to get resolve. And these people know what they're doing. They know they're getting caught out. That's how the fallen, sinful human nature works. And some will just disappear. They'll go back to exes or go deeper into habits like alcohol or drugs. And a lot of these alcoholics and drug addict people, a lot of their thinking is around the drug and the people they're associated with. And as they get older, if they meet somebody half decent, as they mentally start to decompose and it starts to show physically, they make one of two choices. They're either going to try and change and renew, which usually by this time it's kind of, they've decided anyway, they're going down, all the way down to death with this stuff. Or they just decompose. It's renew or decompose. And I have to say, I've seen so many of these people, in my case women, and men as friends and that, just decompose. They never ever found a way out of their habits, of their drugs, of their whinging, of their whining, of their backstabbing, of their losing relationships, of their sabotaging relationships. And instead of renewing and having every opportunity to do that, to be made whole, to be able to come out, their value was more to their addiction. And when the addiction doesn't fulfill, they'll go into reckless sex. And when that fails, they go around and around and around and around until they're decomposed. Now, we've heard about composure. Keep your composure. You look underneath the surface of these people and there is no composure. Underneath the surface, the sinful nature, the carnal nature, and the surrender to this and all its habits and all its destruction, both physically and mentally, spiritually and emotionally, is decomposing that person from the inside out. Some hide it better than others. But I promise you, if there was an X-ray machine that you could carry on your forehead and you could see in the minds and the bodies of some people, you would be petrified. Judging's not a good thing to do. Judging is definitely in an illegitimate way, just for backbiting's sake, just for psychological vandalism's sake, just for psychological assault's sake, just for undermining people's efforts towards somebody in the way of love. That is all going to come back and decompose that person. That's why you don't do those things. That's why the Bible says don't do those things. Just don't do it. These people that are trying to split themselves between, and as a matter of fact, I think what ends up happening, because I've had women that have been on pills, alcohol, weed, all together, the lot, all in one. I've walked alongside these people and they don't find their way out. I've not had one that has found their way out. They go deeper. They become more self-destructive, not because of me. No. I've seen them heal. I've seen them come almost out of it, only to be pulled back by family members, bad influences, friends that don't want to be on their own, that have wrecked their lives, wrong bonds, emotional attachments that are just completely out of order. And you can't help these people. This is the point. Do not give dogs what is holy. Do not throw pearls before swine. And I can say this with every bit of authority because I've studied this Bible for the last, I've got a doctorate. If you've got a doctorate, good. I've got one and I'll use it. Because these people, no matter what the effort, will trample it under their feet and turn and try and tear you to pieces. The funny thing about all this is, if you've had enough life experience as what I've had, you're a mile ahead of them and you just watch them self-destruct. I've seen some ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous people decompose, trying to put on a composure, and it's just absolutely decomposing right in front of me. And what are you supposed to do? Well, you don't. You get to the point. I'm not going to put myself in this position again. I'm not going to put this life of mine in a place where it's psychologically and emotionally and physically and spiritually being torn to pieces. And my Lord and your Lord says, do not give yourself to people basically who take you for granted. Don't do it. Start to stand up and say, I can see this is just decomposing. I can't build. I'm not emotionally right. I don't feel right. I don't sense that it's right. I'm not got any happiness towards this at all. It's making me sad because the person that you're with is not committed. They're just turning up. You've got to understand that you're against a lot. Backbiting, judging, undermining, character vandalizing. And if the person that you're with doesn't stand up and stand with you and try and stop it, They're not with you. As a matter of fact, they might be the one doing it. You don't know. You would be shocked if you saw what went on behind your back. So this is what I'm going to say to you today. Do not give these people the best part of you. Give them nothing. Don't throw yourself before swine. Because if you do, they'll trample your goodness under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. And these people have got a way of turning it all back on you. I've seen them, knowing that things are coming to an end, finally coming up with an idea of solution, only to justify themselves so they can go away and say, oh, I made an attempt to fix things, but he wouldn't do it, or she wouldn't do it. It's rubbish. Usually it's the wrong way about going about it. And if you're wise and got counsel like I have, and you should all have somebody to fall back on that's unbiased, you can protect yourself from troublemakers and people that want to bring things to harm. Just don't attach to it. Don't engage it. Don't entertain it. Pretend it's not there, because that's what they want. As soon as you engage trouble, you're acknowledging it. And if it's just delusion, then you must be delusional yourself. If you have your mind about you and your wits about you and you know something's wrong and you're being incriminated for it, hold your ground. Just hold your ground. And you'll find out who's who in the end. And that's what will be able to help you to be set free. If people want to pull themselves towards drugs and harmful things in their decomposure, because they're losing their composure,